Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. Today, my guest is retired Supervisory Special Agent of the FBI, Dennis Franks, who today is a partner for Viollis Group International. And today with Dennis, we'll talk about the attack on a group of Jews that happened about 1 month ago in Boulder, Colorado, when a guy by the name of Mohammed Sabri Soliman from Egypt attacked a group of Jews who were just doing a walk for the hostages that were taken by Hamas on October 7, 2 years ago. Thanks for your time, Dennis. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Before we get to the topic of this conversation, would you like to tell me and my viewers something about yourself, whatever you feel is relevant for this conversation that we're going to have about this attack in Colorado?
Just in general, I was an FBI agent for 22 plus years, and I worked primarily organized crime and drug cartel investigations, but I wore a lot of hats. I was on a SWAT team for several years, a firearms instructor. I was an international police instructor. I was a crisis management coordinator, undercover program coordinator, and then I was promoted to supervisory positions and supervised a drug task force and then organized crime squad where we focused on Asian and Russian organized crime. And then I ran an intelligence group. And then for the last 6 or 7 years of my career, I ran our special operations group, which at that time, we focused primarily on counterterrorism. But it was a lot of surveillance in looking at potential terrorists.
Okay, in this case that we're going to discuss today, what happened is that this guy tried to set on fire people because we cannot say that he shot at them because he didn't have any fire gun. But what he did was he attacked them with Molotov cocktails, and he also had a makeshift flamethrower that he made for himself. So is this, in your opinion, a hate crime or terrorism or kind of both?
It's definitely a hate crime, and it's, the definition of terrorism is when somebody commits an act of violence to achieve political or ideological goals. And it could be that, but he was charged by the U.S. government with hate crimes. He was charged with, let me see, I think it was 14 counts of hate crimes, I believe, by U.S. government, and 12 counts of hate crimes. And basically, hate crimes defined as violence that is motivated by prejudice or basis of ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender, etc. So, as far as definition wise, I think his motives were definitely geared toward being hate crimes and hate generated. He was also charged by the state of Colorado in their jurisdiction with 118 criminal counts, including 14 counts of attempted murder and counts that involve using an incendiary device. And they even threw in there that he created, or there were crimes against an animal because the dog was injured also. So they you've heard this expression perhaps, they throw the book at him. Well, the state of Colorado threw the book at him with 118 criminal counts, which the penalty could add up to hundreds of years in prison.
Well, but in this case, we have an attacker who was yelling things such as "End Zionist" and "Free Palestine." What does this say about the attacker himself? And still, this doesn't make it terrorism?
Well, it could. I mean, I think it could be turned a terroristic act and could be charged with terrorism too. But I think they went straight with the hate crimes. I don't know that they have connected him with any terrorist organizations per se. Now, I don't know what evidence they have, what the FBI has found, if he has been linked to any Hamas or any, terrorist organization or Hezbollah or any terrorist organizations. But, or if he was even a follower or an adherent to those organizations. So, you know, I would not rule out terrorism as being, potential charges eventually, but I don't see the need for it yet. I think, the hate was there, his rantings, the comments he's even made after being arrested that are clear indications of hate crimes. And the penalties, I don't think are going to make a difference one way or another. So uh, the, in my opinion, the hate crimes definitely cover the situation and what he was espousing.
This guy have been planning this attack for a long time because, as we said, he created the weapons himself, both Molotov cocktails and a makeshift flamethrower. But he also dressed up as a gardener to be able to get closer to these people having this walk. So he planned this for a long time. So when this attack happened, of course, the Jewish Museum shooting in Washington, D.C. was just 1 week before. So my first thought was, this is a copycat. But this was not a copycat because this guy has been planning this for long before the attack in Washington, D.C. So what does this long planning tell us about this, the profile of this attacker, in your opinion?
Yeah, so he indicated after he was arrested that he'd planned it for at least a year or some kind of attack for at least a year. And I think this was the opportunity he found just by researching where there would be a Jewish gathering. He said that he waited a year because he wanted his daughter to graduate. Whatever his reasoning for that, that it would be easier for her perhaps dealing with the repercussions if she had graduated from high school. So it was a planned attack in a at least a year. Now, as far as an attack, as far as acting out his grievances that he felt. What I have learned in my career and subsequently, not only the FBI investigating, terrorism to some extent, working with in investigations involving terrorists. Now, I'll speak in generalities because there were a number of cases we worked in which we conducted surveillance of individuals that were known to have attended training camps, terrorism training camps in other countries. And quite frankly, not all of them ended up doing anything or taking any actions or really showing any signs of any problems. I think there were at least a couple of them that did end up getting prosecuted, getting charged by the U.S. government with terrorism related charges. But the bigger problem, in my opinion, is which can be evidenced by situations such as the Boston Marathon bombings, domestic terrorism such as Tim McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing, in matters such as that. What we experienced, what we realized in that a bigger problem sometimes. Now, someone who's been to terrorism training, overseas, that's definitely a problem. That's an issue. But sometimes the ones who tend to act out more, or the lone wolves, or the malcontents. I mean, I had this calling. I had a saying about them is there are a certain number of individuals in our society who are malcontents looking for a cause. They're malcontents, and this is true with international terrorism. It's true with domestic terrorism. It's true with um, even criminal activity to some extent. Is that there are people in our world, in our societies, who are just maladjusted. They blame other people for all their problems, or other causes. They blame things, and these people tend to sometimes be the bigger problems is they adopt a cause. And we saw this in our investigations that there would be sometimes that there would be U.S. citizens who were radicalized in prison or otherwise to because they were malcontents. And I don't know his background, Muhammad Solomon's background per se in depth, but evidently my experience is based on investigations I've worked in some behavioral analysis is that he could have been a malcontent. I mean, he had grievances about the way Israel went into Gaza and the treatments and the atrocities on both sides. There obviously been atrocities on both sides, but a lot of people have those grievances, but not everybody acts out on them. And this is an example of where somebody does go to the extreme. Um, he's not alone, and there are others, and there will be others, obviously. But to me, it's another interesting study in behavioral analysis, looking at people's backgrounds and what causes them to adopt causes. Now, part of I would be interested in learning also is, was he influenced in any way by online activity? Did he follow certain websites? Did he follow certain chat groups? Their terrorist organizations have learned, they've adapted over the years and learned that they can be successful by just online activity in channeling, groups into or people into these sort of these echo chambers, online echo chambers, where they can espouse their views back and forth, and then once you know uh, once they reach a certain level, then they can be accepted into another group, and where they can be more radicalized and more the speech, the activity that they're involved in, the rhetoric they're involved in gets more involved because they've been kind of vetted by the terrorist organization to be accepted into these other groups that they have more control over, and it's less public scrutiny perhaps by people online.
So probably this person had no connection with others abroad anyhow, because we saw in the recent years a switch from certain type of terrorism, for instance, with Al Qaeda, that basically said, come and join our training camps in Afghanistan, to ISIS, who said, you don't have to come to Afghanistan or any other place. You just have to stay there and we'll radicalize you by internet. This is not what happened. This guy was probably a lone wolf doing everything by himself and just probably being close in his echo chamber, as you were mentioning. Is that correct?
As far as I know, I don't know what the details are. I don't know what the FBI has learned since then. It that could very well just be the case that he was just a lone wolf. And but he could have been influenced. He could have been either directly or indirectly. Otherwise, I don't have enough facts to be able to know that at this point.
What is the role of social media in this, in spreading hate of this kind? Because the social media were born to, to create something good, to help people stay in touch with each other or to share their contents, and also give the opportunity to everybody to produce content without being a journalist or an editor or a filmmaker or anything of the sort. But now we have the second side of the coin, because social media is also used to spread hate. What do you think?
Um, that could be a whole different topic, social media, the pros and cons of social media. Obviously, there are a lot of pros, but there's so many cons. Um, there's so many that I see. I mean, some of these, quite frankly, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but some of these, chat groups and things, not just terrorism related, but some of these groups or apps, applications that have been created are just end up having so many sinister connotations and involvement that is beyond what good social interaction should be. Um, so there there's so much out there, whether it's social media, whether it's social or applications like that, or so much dark web stuff. It's just it would blow most people's minds to know just how much is out there and how sinister some of it is. Um, Again, I don't know the particular facts, the details in this case, whether he was influenced, but I have to think he would be in some way. I mean, he's probably not immune to, looking at things on the internet, news, things of that nature. Obviously, he's aware of what was happening or has been happening in the Middle East, particularly since the, October, or, a year and a half or more ago. Um, so it's just hard to say. I mean, I think the activities he took or an indication that he was acting alone, that that there's no evidence that I'm aware of that anybody assisted him. The making the Molotov cocktails and the jars, and then the using the weed killer is a flamethrower, is pretty much things you could just pick up online easily. Um, so again, it more than likely he was a lone wolf, but did he along the way get encouragement or some um, influence by other groups? I don't know. Hopefully the investigation will, excuse me, demonstrate that one way or another at some point, or we may never know.
We do have here something very similar to what happened in Washington, D.C. The guy didn't try to escape. So, as happened there at the Jewish Museum, in this case, he also was planning on killing himself because he had gasoline with himself to set himself on fire. What does this detail tell us about his profile? Because I mean, till 1 month ago, we would have expected a manhunt, as in the case of Luigi Mangione or even the Unabomber, who was much more famous. Why don't these guys try to flee?
Because he wanted to be a martyr. In his own eyes, he wanted to be a martyr, for whatever reason. Again, you have to get into the psychology of what's going on with them, and what's going on in their minds. But the fact that he did plan on it, and maybe had a change of mind or heart, that I think there's some information that he indicated that he even did not go to the full extent of what he was planning to do once he saw the what was happening, how it was affecting people. And the same thing, there are a lot of times when whether it's a terrorist activity, a hate crime, or even criminal activity, where somebody says, well, I'm not going to be taken alive. Well, for the most part, they don't follow through with it. They do decide that they're not going to take their lives. But I mean, it again, it gets to these malcontents, and what's motivating them, and do they want to be a martyr? Do they want to just is this a way of ending their lives and creating some notoriety? There's so many factors that get involved in just recently, there just within the last day, there was a shooting in Idaho, a sniper, and he's 20 years old. What possesses somebody to want to kill other people and then take their own life, or go out in a blaze, so to speak. um, it's kind of in a way, it's a sad commentary that you know people out there that need help, and they maybe they're not getting the help they need. It involves so many, socioeconomic and um, environmental and other factors that it's, is the world is very imperfect, and uh, it's not getting any more perfect uh, as we speak, unfortunately, when it should be. It's, the evolution should be making things better, but it's we're just not treating each other too well.
Absolutely. So after the attack, the police searched his house, in this case, to make sure whether his wife was aware of what this person was doing. And how helpful was this in the investigation, as far as you know?
I don't really know. Obviously, it's always a technique that law enforcement will go search their residence. They'll search their computers, their phones, and any other things. They're going to try to look at any connections they can. If there've been any connections online, um, any connections, they're going to interview neighbors. They're going to interview friends, coworkers, you name it. You're going to try to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to try to get the full picture of what was behind all this. And I just don't have any facts about anything. I haven't learned about anything that was discovered that has any bearing at this point.
Well, what is the state of anti-Semitism in America? Because we saw two bad attacks, two very evil attacks in 1 week. Is it just a cycle, or are we facing a peak?
I think we're facing a peak. Unfortunately, it's been, with the extremist groups and others in domestically in the U.S. that has been an issue for decades, and it's been increasing. And then there seems to have been a lot of rhetoric in the last few years that it's I don't want to say it's more accepting, but it's more out in the open. People are more willing to express their anti-Semitic views and without repercussions necessarily. And even if people weren't completely anti-Semitic, I'm afraid that just the nature of our society has reached a place where they're tending to make a little bit more of a step into that belief or ideology or feelings than they would have otherwise. And does that make sense? I mean, what causes people to they may have biases. People have biases. People are have their own prejudices, they have biases, but what causes them to step further into that bias or prejudice? Sometimes it's by being influenced by what they view as mistreatment of what they view as their own type of people. And it's kind of a long, I don't know if it's an adequate answer, but I do think that anti-Semitism is increasing in the U.S., unfortunately. Um, and it's evident. I mean, just the attacks. I've done I've security measures. I've helped synagogues with security precautions, and the fact that it has to be done so extensively, even more than it used to, is evidence in itself, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I agree. So this person was charged with attempted murder, as you said, and also animal cruelty. Any comments on his charges?
Um, I think the state of Colorado is doing its due diligence. They're doing an adequate job of bringing, the charges that should be brought there. 118 criminal counts is pretty overwhelming. A lot of times, prosecutors will bring just the strongest charges. Well, I think there are a lot of strong charges here, but they're not hesitating in, I think, going to the full extent of what's there, of what's available, and and rightly so. An act like this can't be minimized. And I don't see any I don't see any downside to them charging 118 counts. Um, and it's pretty convincing evidence, so I don't see much of a defense that they can have. With defense attorneys, it's always interesting to see what tack they're going to have, what kind of positions they're going to take, and even the defendant himself may have a change of heart. He may, he's admitted this in interviews afterwards in custody, but he may have a change of heart at some point. But the government's obviously taking every step they can to make sure that um, they have the evidence and the adequacy of charges to prosecute it.
Well, Dennis, many thanks for your time again. I think that we gave a good explanation about this little discussed case, actually, because, for instance, in Italy, the DC shooting was much more present in the news than this case. So I think that we did some justice also by discussing this. And the only thing I can add is I hope we'll stop soon discussing anti-Semitism, because I hope that it won't be needed in the near future.
Yeah, I don't know what the tipping point's going to be for that. Unfortunately, it's just it's like this Rodney King was a situation that happened probably several decades ago in Los Angeles, and there were riots and so forth afterwards. But he's the one that coined this phrase, "Why can't we all just get along?" And it's true. Why can't we all just get along? I mean, it's just it should be that way, and it's going to have to be eventually. If I'm not one that looks at things in a negative light necessarily, although I have to in the security business. But if we're going to survive as a society, we have to get it right. We have to figure it out. And maybe at some point, a lot of the things that are happening, terrorism, prejudice, and so forth, maybe it's all coming to a light so that things get worse before they get better.
Life is like this usually.
Yeah.
Everything in life is like this usually. Well, Dennis, thanks again for your time. And thanks everybody else for watching this video. And I'll see you all in my next episode. Bye-bye.